Good evening, everybody. It's really lovely to have you all here again with us. Tonight's guest is Nicholas Handoll. Nicholas has been an international teacher and lecturer for 40 years and is the co-founder of the Sutherland Cranial College. He's studied with Rollin Becker, Magoun and Viola Frymann, to name but a few, and was guided by Rollin Becker to do research into quantum mechanics. He is the author of the groundbreaking book, Anatomy of Potency, and his talk this evening is based around questions that have been sent to him when you registered. So hopefully he will be able to encompass quite a number of the topics that you have brought to him. We're really hugely grateful to him for giving us his time. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Nicholas Handoll.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Tracy. I hope you can hear me. I hope you can all hear me well. Can you hear me, Tracy?
I can indeed, yes.
Lovely, thank you. Well, good evening, everybody. I hope you're all well. I hope you're all coping well with the time we're living in. Thank you for all your questions. The last poll, where there are over 100 questions, so thank you for those. There's not going to be an opportunity to answer them all individually. So what I've done is to combine them into groups, and I hope really to be able to use those as topics to talk on and to bring in some of your questions and interests as we go. So yes, I hope you have been coping pretty well. I must confess that we've been coping pretty well here with the lockdown, because I live in the depths of Herefordshire, which is the least populated county in the whole of England. And I live in a small cottage in one quiet nook of Herefordshire. And I thought you just might be interested if I just show you what's outside my front door. I'm just outside here, just in case you're interested. You'll see it because I'm lifting up the screen up, so you'll see. It's a lovely evening out here, I must say it is. I have to stick my face in one corner of the screen so I can see what you can see. Well, that's we live on looking down the Mono Valley. That is the Mono Valley down there, the valley of the River Mono, and it goes down into the River Wye at a place, believe it or not, called Monmouth. And so probably you can see down there, there's an old, very old church, the yeah, quite a famous church down there, and it's a very, very nice place to live and watch the world go by, I must confess. So I'm very fortunate to be in this part of the world, I think. So better come into a bit of sanity here. Good. Right, well, a lot of questions about osteopathy, particularly Rollin Becker and the people who taught me. One of the big questions is what's changed in osteopathy in my time, and what have I learned from Rollin Becker? Well, I started in osteopathy. The first thing I knew about osteopathy was a chap by the name of Stephen Ward. Now, many of you may not even have heard of him, Stephen Ward, but he was an osteopath he was a society osteopath, and involved with what became known as the Profumo scandal with Christine Keeler and Mandy Rice Davis. It was back in 1963. And he, in fact, was framed by the Macmillan government at the time to get him out the way, and he committed suicide. But you know, people knew about Stephen Ward in 1963, And I first applied to the BSO in 1966, 1966, and I qualified in 1971. And a lot's changed from then. In those days, osteopathy, for a start, wasn't known. What's osteopathy? So we are worried about calling ourselves osteopaths or not calling ourselves osteopaths, or some are. And, you know, when I started, people didn't even know what an osteopath was. One person said, oh, is that something to do with feet? But it was, for those who knew, they knew it had something to do with back pain. Well, yes, it's true. That's good. And a lot of osteopaths then did and still do deal primarily with back pain, and that they do a jolly good job and do a great deal of good for people, because it's such a debilitating condition and expensive in time off work, and so a huge amount can be done by osteopaths who just treat back pain. But osteopathy is more than that. Osteopathy can treat neck pain, but osteopathy is more than that. Can treat joint pain, sports injuries, but osteopathy is more than that. It can treat visceral conditions, children's conditions. It can treat more than that. It's been described as a three-legged stool now, that you need that it needs all three legs: structural osteopathy, visceral osteopathy, cranial osteopathy. It is even more than that. I think what's happened is we talk about the principles of osteopathy, but right from the start, right from when I even started, I think we had lost, historically, for decades, I think we've lost the philosophy of osteopathy. What Still was trying to say, I think what we need to do is to go back to Still, which is one of the things I've done, to find out what was this guy saying. And in fact, was he a silly old fool in a tall hat? Or in fact, did he have something that we've missed? And the chap was a visionary. When you look into what Still was saying and understand the environment in which he was saying it, the man was a visionary. And we do ourselves disservice by forgetting him. His philosophy. The philosophy of osteopathy is the foundation from which the principles derive. Philosophy of osteopathy is the foundation from which the principles derive. The principles are the way that philosophy is acted out. And that philosophy can be acted out all sorts of different ways. An osteopathic treatment, an osteopathic consultation is a relationship between the practitioner and the patient. The patient brings their unique genetic inheritance, their worries, their concerns, their symptoms as an individual to that relationship. The practitioner also brings his or her unique genetic inheritance, their study, their training, their interests, their reading, their preferences, their particular skills, their individual skills, making that unique relationship between the two. And so the way that osteopathic treatment pans out is very much an individual to the practitioner. And so the principles of osteopathy can be very varied according to all these interests and particular unique skills of each practitioner. One of the things that Rollin Becker kept on saying, he said, the patient is alive. The patient's alive. He kept on talking about a living system. A living system, a living organism. A living organism is a system, collection of parts, a system which constantly renews, regenerates, and reforms itself in order to remain itself alive and healthy. A living organism is a system which constantly underline in your own mind, if you would, constantly renews, regenerates, and reforms itself in order to remain alive and healthy. As we know, the skin continues to reform, the blood is reformed all the time. Even our bone system are reformed through the Haversian system. They are reformed every, 15 or so years or so. And that's what a living system does. It doesn't do it because of disease or infirmity or injury. It does it because it's alive. So, but this living organism is constantly being, let me get this out here, is constantly being assaulted by life events. And life events of like infections, virus infections, injuries, physical trauma. There's something coming up there. Physical trauma, emotional stress, that's a big one. Emotional stress, dietetic problems, environmental problems, work problems, all these stresses of life, what we call stresses of life, continually assault this living organism. If the stresses of life at any one time exceed the body's ability to self-renew, regenerate, and reform, then symptoms will result. And those symptoms can be classified into diseases and conditions. Now, the medical system that we have at the moment is designed to diagnose and identify these conditions or systems or diseases, and to treat those conditions or diseases. Whereas osteopathy is more interested, is more concerned about dealing with those factors which have compromised the health system in the first place. That was essentially what Still was saying. So whereas medical diagnosis seeks to establish what's gone wrong, an osteopathic diagnosis seeks to establish why it isn't right. And if we can remove those factors which have compromised the body, the body's ability to maintain health itself, that is essentially what an osteopath does. Problem with Still was he was so keen to get over what was his ideas that you lost everything you lost the message with the bathwater. One of his, the first dean of the American school was his nephew, or his wife's nephew, Turner Hewlett. It's his wife's nephew, and he became the first dean of the American school. And he actually was able to be much more succinct. And what Turner Hewlett said was this. He said, if you want to modify the vital processes of the body, that's medical. If you want to modify the vital processes of the body, that's medical. If you want to remove the factors which are interfering with the vital processes of the body, that's osteopathic. And that puts, at least to my mind, very succinctly the key to what Still was trying to say, and the key to what osteopathy is. This is one of the things that Rollin Becker was talking about. Becker was a man of few words. He didn't say he didn't say a huge amount, but he did say two things. He did say repeatedly was remind us that the body is a living organism, is living, it's alive, and to repeat Sutherland's words that he said, that Sutherland said in the second edition of the Cranial Bowl, where Sutherland said, he said in the preface to the second edition of the Cranial Bowl, he said, the fundamental principle of technique, use the word technique, was to allow the physiological function within to manifest its unerring potency, to allow the body to make its own changes from within, as opposed to trying to make a change, to make a change from outside. Allow the body to make its own changes from within, rather than trying to decide on a treatment from the outside by the practitioner. As I started to develop my understanding, I did the first course in UK in 1972, and that was a very bony course. It was very mechanical, talking about bones moving and sutures. And in those days, they were going through a very bony stage, because Sutherland had been criticized badly by his own compatriots, by his own colleagues, criticized badly. And he withdrew what he said and made it very mechanical. He said they've got to understand it for themselves, and therefore he wasn't very forthcoming. The course he had, therefore, was very mechanical. And I worked with it, and I went on other courses, and what they were teaching was that this motion, this primary respiratory mechanism, where was it coming from? Well, it wasn't bony, it wasn't from the bones, it wasn't from the muscles, it clearly was not from the muscles. And we were taught it was coming from the cerebrospinal fluid. The more I worked with this, it didn't seem to me to be coming from the cerebrospinal fluid. And it seemed to be a reaction to something else outside. So that was when I said this to Rollin Becker when he came on the next course. Came to give the next course. I said, I don't think it's coming from the CSF. I think it's from coming something outside. Now, as I said, Rollin Becker was a man of few words. And so, yet all he said to me was, and I quote, "Read quantum mechanics," and walked off. So, okay, I logged that. And it was later on, I started to realize that I had to try and research this, which led me into reading quantum mechanics. People have said in some of the questions, let's go through some of the questions, you see. What was the most amazing thing for you during your long practice? What was it about osteopathy that kept you interested all the years you were in practice? What's the most single important guiding principle for you as a practitioner when meeting a patient for the first time? Well, what's the most remarkable event that you have experienced with your work? Well, what kept me interested? What's the most amazing thing? For me, osteopathy changes your view of reality. It forces me to change my view of reality. Reality, as we know it, is the response of our five senses: sound, sight, touch, taste, and smell. If we couldn't hear, if we didn't have sound, sight, touch, taste, and smell, there's no input into our cortex. But it's limited to sound, sight, touch, taste, and smell. And it made me realize that reality as we understand it, that lovely view out there down the Mono Valley, the reality of solid tables, solid walls, people, is a construction of our cortex. It's not what's out there, it's the model that's constructed in here. It works very well. It's good, okay, but it's not completely true. It's a model. And in fact, that model breaks down when you really test it. And so it was osteopathy and researching into osteopathy that made me realize that the reality we understand is not the full reality that is there. Because, and then when you, so therefore, what is the reality? What is that patient on your treatment couch? Because it's not what you think it is initially. It's not who it is, who is that patient on the treatment couch, is what is that patient on the treatment couch. And that led me into research, into quantum physics, and to try and understand the strangeness of reality. And when you start testing that and taking that patient as what they really are, not what we think they are, something else happens. Something else happens to the quality of your treatment. And that's the key to the seminar, in the course I give with Caroline Penn on energy osteopathy. That's what energy osteopathy is about. Because we, and people will recognize that we are essentially energy beings. We are life, matter is essentially energy. But what's fascinating to me is to realize that there is more energy around us than there is within us. There's more energy around us than there is within us. What is it that is that the primary respiratory mechanism is responding to? It's responding to the energy around us, and also it's responding to it's not responding to, it is understood by our own senses. And the sense of touch is much greater than the average person understands. And it can be developed, as osteopaths do, and to open the sense of touch to a greater awareness. It expands our understanding and expands our understanding. That's the key to the course Energy Osteopathy. So if you're interested in expanding that further, then come on it. So what's the single most guiding principle for you as a practitioner when treating a patient for the first time? The first thing is to make a relationship. Make the relationship with that individual, and to try to establish what it is that's preventing their lovely body from renewing, self-renewing, reorganizing, and adjusting itself. And the most remarkable event I experienced with my work has been to really expand my understanding of reality. That's all the way I can put it. There's another interesting question here. Which is the most difficult serious diagnosis you've helped a client with? Interesting. What do you mean serious? Because yeah, I've seen patients with cancer. I've seen patients who are dying. I've seen patients with lots of pain. Probably one of the earliest experiences I had that meant a lot to me was a lady, middle-aged lady, who I saw for back pain. She came back 6 months later and said, look, I've been diagnosed with an abdominal tumor. And they say it's inoperable. Can you do anything to help? So I said, well, I don't know. Let's try it. Let's see. And she came back a week later and she said, you know, I felt better. The pain went for 3 days. And she came back to see me every week, because she found that she had peace for 3 days after every treatment. And eventually she died. But the gratitude in that woman's face for just those few days of peace after a treatment was worth everything, as much to all sorts of people in extreme pain. It really showed me what the potential is. Now, I didn't quite know what I was doing other than listening to the body, allowing the body to make its own changes from within. And then you have to be guided by the response from the patient. Let's go something else here. How do we explain to patients what we're actually doing so it's better understood by the patient? Frankly, in answer, how do I explain what I do? I don't. It is not up to us, in my view, to give patients a seminar in the philosophy of osteopathy. It's nothing to do with them. It's only to do, their interest is what's wrong with them. So my advice to those who want that is to don't give them any explanation. If you try to, they'll only come up with more questions. It's not in their. That's not what they've come for. They've come for your advice about them in particular. So don't try and give them don't try and sell the idea. Just tell them what you can do for them and leave it at that. Yes, talk about grounding. And if you have any problems or lesions yourself, how do we become aware of presence for this work? You're trying to palpate at the limits of your ability. Always, so am I, all the time. You're trying to palpate the limits of your ability, and as that improves, your limits improve, your limits develop, and your limits develop, and your limits develop. So by definition, you're always trying to palpate the limits of your ability. Therefore, try to, first of all, look after your own health as much as you can. That's important to do. And secondly, then before you put your hands on your patient, yes, ground yourself. Get yourself calm so that your first introduction to that patient is from a place of openness and calm. Sit comfortably on your chair. Make sure you are comfortable on your chair. Ground yourself to the center of the earth so you are stable. And when you put your hands on that patient, do it from after you've quietened yourself. Ask that mechanism if it would be so kind as to allow you to sit on the outside and watch what it's doing. It's that mechanism, it's that patient that's in charge, not you. You're allowing the patient's body to make its own changes from within. It's not something that you are deciding to do. And sit on the outside, as I said, and allow that mechanism to ask that mechanism if it would be so kind as to allow you to sit on the outside and listen to what it's doing. What do you do then? And there have been several questions about how do we shift our attention? What do we decide to do? Don't decide to do anything other than to listen to that mechanism. Because if you can listen to that mechanism, it will know you are there and it can use you the best of its ability if you are really listening to it. It's rather like the best analogy I can give you is say with psychotherapy, some of the listening therapies, where you listen to the body, listen to the client rather, and let them talk. And let them talk, a bit like, more specialists, just like Samaritans do. but obviously with the therapists more detail. But allow them to talk, allow them to express themselves, allow them to feel heard. If they feel heard, they will be in a better position, better state to be able to sort out their own problems. So allow that body to feel heard, because you understand where it is, and if it wishes to, it can take what you from your connection with it, what it needs. We've got a couple of questions here. Yeah. What is it like not to expect anything from the treatment you give to the patient? The patient has come with their problems, as I said, to that relationship, with their problems, their worries. All you can do is what you can do. Don't promise things, and it's up to them then to take what they need. The body, if you can relate to that mechanism, it will take what it wants. The key is to relate to that mechanism and let it do the work. We don't, as far as osteopathy is concerned, we allow the body to make its own changes. And if that's not good enough for patients, their choice, it's their body. Occasionally I get someone who expects more than I'm prepared to give. Very rarely. Many people say, okay, but what are you doing? Tell you later. If someone says doing a mechanism, doing a treatment, what are you doing? Say, tell you later. And very often they'll forget the question later on. There's also a question here about potency. Potency, I define potency as the potential for the body to self-renew, regenerate, and reform. The potential for the body to renew, regenerate, and reform. Therefore, potential is like the potential in a battery. A fully charged battery has a high potential. It's not doing anything. It's stationary. It's still. A potency, therefore, is potential. It is still not doing anything. The potency is not acting out anything. The potency is the ability, is the potential for the body to renew, regenerate, and reform, and that's closely associated, of course, with its general health. Come out of that one just so close. Look here. Yeah. How do you work with the client system if you don't feel, he says the CRI. The CRI, the cranial rhythmic impulse, it was not something that Sutherland said. That came from a paper by Woods and Woods in 1963, I think it was. It's a term that they use. It's not a term that Sutherland used, and I think it's potentially confusing. Does the body fluctuate? Is there a CRI? I don't use the word CRI. Does the mechanism fluctuate? I don't know. What I say, and I think this is important, is it's what it feels to me. It feels to me as a living organism, that living organism I am associating with is fluctuating. I don't necessarily feel the body flexing, extending, externally rotating, internally rotating all the time. I don't think that's important for me. And to say, can you prove that it's happening, is irrelevant for far as I'm concerned. The key is what it feels to me, the relationship to my sensorium of what is the expression of health with that patient. What is interesting, though, is when there's a change in that patient's physiology, if you like, when I'm with that patient and there is a change, then the body does appear to flex, extend, externally rotate, internally rotate in just the way that Sutherland described it. It eases and breathes as though you've oiled it. That's when I feel this mechanism expressing itself, as Sutherland described, most of all. And there was one other thing there on there I was going to mention. Yeah. Okay. So if you can't feel any expression of motion, perhaps there isn't one. Is it you, or is it perhaps that you're feeling what you're palpating is correct, that there isn't a good expression of motion? As I understand it, as far as I'm concerned, the body is always expressing life through motion. That's one of the ways of doing so. One of the ways of expressing life is expressing life through motion, and that is always there. If it's not there, you're dead. However, that expression of life can be so bound down with the life events we've been talking about earlier, the infections, the injuries, the worries, emotional problems, all the various events of life, to the extent that that mechanism is so overwhelmed that it cannot express itself comfortably. I have a picture, I like things in pictures, a bit like a rugby game where you've got a ruck and you've got a whole pile of bodies on top of the ball, whole pile of blokes on top of the ball there. You can't see the ball at all. The ball is still there. It's still underneath. And what we have to do is to pick off all these various things, pick them away, to allow that ball, that expression of health, that expression of life to start to be revealed and to come out again. As Turner Hewlett said, osteopathy, if you want to remove the factors which are compromising health, that's osteopathy. Remove all those things which are not allowing that mechanism to express itself. That if that the patient is alive, somewhere underneath, life is there, and what we have to is to allow it to reveal itself. But again, as Rollin used to say, coming back to Rollin Becker, he said, sick tissues don't make good corrections. So if you've got tissues which are an organism, a person with so many stresses that their mechanism is really compressed, you're not going to make big changes because those tissues are not healthy. They only make small changes. Get a little bit off, a little bit better, a little bit better. And as that mechanism, as that body starts to express life once again, it can make bigger changes, and healthy tissues can make bigger changes. So, as Rollin said, sick tissues don't make good corrections. Don't expect them to be. They'll only do a little bit at a time as they come along, as the expression and the energy within that system is revealed. But that potency, that potential, is always there while that person is alive. Let me have another look at another question here. We've got some more chats here. Let's have a look here. Ooh. Yeah, there are a number of questions here about osteopathy compared to other therapeutic agencies. I know about osteopathy. I don't know about other therapeutic agencies, and therefore it's not for me to say, and therefore I'm afraid I'm going to have to leave that with you. I can only tell you about osteopathy, and if that helps, well then I'm pleased. Yeah, there's one here about how do you see the future of osteopathy? Well, and people have said about the future of osteopathy is great, because osteopathy has been going now for over 150 years. Still realized, still, I'll tell you what Still said, then you know. Okay, Still said, osteopathy is the science of the structure and function of the human mechanism by which nature may recover from disease. Osteopathy is the science of the structure and function of the human mechanism by which nature may recover from disease. Now we've got to remember that Still was talking in the 1800s, now 150 years ago. He didn't have the science in those days. There was no, he didn't know anything about what's the laws of physics, particularly the laws of several laws of heat and light. Anyway, yeah, thermodynamics. Thank you. Yes, he didn't know about the laws of thermodynamics hadn't been devised, and so you know. But and therefore some of the words he used were kind of fairly loose. And the significant things in that quote from Still is that several things. Firstly, he used to use different words for the same thing. He varied things. It was not that scientific, but he used the structure. What's significant? He said the structure and function of the human mechanism. He didn't talk about the human body, the human mechanism, the human physiology, the whole thing, the whole body. And then he said by which nature may recover from disease. Nature. He also used the word health. Sometimes he used the word nature, sometimes he used the word health. So if we say osteopathy is a science of the structure and function of the human physiology by which the body's health may recover itself from disease. That's what we were saying earlier. The body is able to recover itself from disease. And osteopathy is concerned with dealing with those factors which have compromised health. The other particular thing to note about Still's definition of osteopathy is that what I've given you there is about 20 words long. The full quote is over 100 words long, and it can be found, if you want to find it, on the very back page of this book, autobiography, the very back page, and it's over 100 words. And let's face it, by the time you've read it, you don't understand what the hell he's talking about. What you've got to do is to select out the important words. That's what Still was talking about. Oh yeah, we're talking about so that will survive. Osteopathy will survive. As far as osteopathy is concerned, as far as the structure in UK is concerned, well, as you know, I've had a bit of a run-in with GOsC. Oh dear, what a pity. The GOsC now is not what we originally signed up to. It is not what we originally agreed and signed up to back in last century. Essentially, it was, as we were told, it was going to be a statutory body to represent osteopathy and to regulate it. And then it kind of got changed by orders in council, and it no longer represented osteopathy. And after a while, it got changed, and it became not a supportive organization for the development of osteopathy and advice of patients, but a police force against osteopaths. And that's what it's become now. It's become a police force to find problems with osteopaths. What's his name? The previous CEO of the GOsC, whose name I don't wish to remember, Tim Walker. Yeah. He said, but you know, he said to me several times, look, it's not people like you where this was before I looked at the run-in. It's not people like you who we're concerned about. It's those few people who are particularly working on their own, away from everyone else. But in being so concerned about all those few osteopaths, they draw in everybody, and therefore controls everybody. And the whole thing, I think, has become out of hand. They become negative, and they become a lost cause, in my view. Out of experience, any restructuring of any organization often can take 2 or 3 goes. You have a go at it, and you need to change it, So frankly, in my view, the best thing for osteopathy is for the GOsC to close and to be reformed. The GOsC won't do that. It'll only be if the profession wants it. If the profession, the only way the profession can do it is to leave. And you leave and you don't pay their fees, and it will close. I don't think it'll happen. I don't think the profession will do that. It might do in a few decades' time. I don't know, but it's up to the GOsC, in my view, has become tyrannical. A tyranny dressed in spin. A tyranny dressed in spin is the way of describing it. If that's acceptable to the profession, well then that's fine. If it's not acceptable, then leave and keep practicing. Though they can't stop you. They cannot stop you practicing. All they can do is stop you calling yourself an osteopath. If you want details, the thing to do is to look up www. osteopathicpreservation.blog. Osteopathicpreservation, one word, .blog. Osteopathicpreservation.blog. And that will give you a long history of what happened with me questioning the GOsC. And as far as I'm concerned, I continue to work. I don't call myself an osteopath. Take great care to respect the Osteopaths Act. So I am not an osteopath, but I treat according to the philosophy of Andrew Taylor Still. So there we go. So the rest of it is up to you. But anyway, look at www.osteopathicpreservation.blog, and that gives you information about other organizations that are developing, which might be helpful. All right. A lot of things about osteopathic practice and quantum physics. This isn't really the place to be able to go into the issue of quantum physics, because quantum physics is based on, what's the word I want? Chance. Chance. It's reading quantum mechanics which made me understand a lot more about reality. And there's no easy way. But that's what I wrote. That's why I wrote the book, Anatomy of Potency. It's about the quantum physics. Helps you to and explains the conclusions I've come to as a result of my research into quantum physics. And then the course, Energy Osteopathy, 2-day course, Energy Osteopathy, summarizes the book and talks about quantum physics. So really, to be able to get a handle on quantum physics and therapeutics, either buy the book or come on the course, and there are details I think there are details at the beginning of this webinar. It's very strange. The first time I've ever given a webinar like this, but I can't see all the people. Usually, standing in front of people, you can see them reactions, but interesting. Yeah, a lot of people also have mentioned conditions. Can you help with this? Can you help with people? There's one about Asperger's syndrome, scoliosis, tinnitus, babies. What conditions can we treat? You see, as I said earlier, let's go back to first principles. Osteopathy doesn't treat conditions. Conditions are the response of that living organism because it cannot self-renew, regenerate, and reform itself comfortably because of a wide range of things, including, as we said, events of life, physical stress, infections, emotional trauma, etc., 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 and of course, genetic inheritance. But osteopathy doesn't look, medicine looks at the conditions. Osteopathy looks at those factors which might have compromised that body to be able to maintain itself in its own way. So every case is different. You cannot treat a condition, you can only treat that individual. So look at those factors which might have compromised the health. Can you do something about it? If there are things you think there you can do something about, do so. There may be cases you can't do something about it. Osteopathy is not a panacea for everything. There are certain things which we can't help. Certainly we might be able to help in another 100 years' time, I don't know. But at the moment, as a current state of knowledge, we can't necessarily help everything. It all depends on that particular case. So there's some, let's have a look here. What do we on for time? Goodness me, gosh. Yeah, there's that here. How do you achieve it? Do you work on the density of bones? What's movement? Because of the study I've done with quantum physics, I'm looking at the energy of the individual in its environment. I'm not I'm not involved with any particular tissue. So I'm not involved particularly with bones, joints, muscles. I'm looking at that totality of that individual as an energy organism involved within its environment. And that is what Anatomy of Potency is about, and that is what the course energy osteopathy is about. I'm being prompted here. Yes, I'm told that I can do this because of all the anatomical knowledge I've developed over the years. And I'm sure that's right. We have to know the anatomy. You can't just wander in here and take your feet off the ground and go up in the clouds. You cannot do that. You have to know your basic anatomy. And for years and years and years, we would get a case and go back to our anatomy books, go back to research on the web, and really get inside the anatomy. Picasso could paint. Picasso could paint like a photograph. But what he could do subsequently would be to take out all those those details of this, that, and the other, and get a case and just paint the emotion that he wanted to express without all the rest of it. He honed it down to the key emotion he wanted to express. But he knew how to paint like a photograph. We need to know the anatomy. We need to know in great detail what is there. Then from there, you can hone out to the energy from which that structure is made. One of the things that I did years ago, because I used to run osteopathic supplies, as some of you know, and I was able to get hold of a consignment of anatomical skulls, which an anatomical supplier was moving out of. And I saw an advertisement for that he was going to sell off all these skulls to a dental supplier. I thought, hold on a minute, we can't let dentists have these. So I made him an offer for the lot, which they accepted. And there were 30 or 40, probably 50 anatomical skulls in that consignment. And I learned a lot from looking at those, and I started to pull them apart at the sutures. And eventually what I did was to disarticulate, in other words, to separate, it must have been at least a couple of dozen skulls, separate out into individual bones, and see how they moved. And that was really, really exciting, fascinating, but also highly educational. You would actually feel that living tissue, because that was living tissue. It's dried, but it was living. And you could feel the life that was there to make those bones as they were. You would feel the angle of the sutures, and how those, because those sutures were only made from the motion that was going on. It could only be that. And you could realize that those bones, although they're dried, when they were wet, they were flexible. Wet bone, living bone is flexible. It's a tissue. It's flexible. And in my opinion, the suture between cranial bones is probably more flexible than the bone itself. I can't prove it, but I think that's a reasonable assumption to make. But it's not the sutures that's important. It's the whole thing that is flexible. But the sutures actually show how that motion went, that existed in the past, and to actually feel from a living tissue was highly, highly educational. Not something you could put into words, but you could actually feel and experience it. And you picked up all sorts of different things, fascinating things. Like, for example, there's some sutures. There was a variability in sutures, and some sutures they were fused. I have one specimen, for example, where the ethmoid is fused to the sphenoid. The ethmoid is actually fused to the sphenoid. Invariably, every single time when there was a significant fusion out of normal in one part of the skull, go to the opposite diameter of the skull, and there was hypermobility. You get a lot of sutural bones, for example, in the occipitomastoid sutures, in the sutures around the occiput parietals, around the back of the head here. Lots of wormian bones, intersutural bones. So there'd be more mobility, greater mobility at the back there, to accommodate for the reduced mobility here. That's the only thing, that's the inevitable conclusion one can make. So why was that necessary? Those bones kept on adapting to, they were living tissue, and they were constantly being renewed, regenerated, reformed. So why were they doing it that way? When there was a fusion one way, there was a hypermobility somewhere else. A strong suggestion that there must have been a motion there, a motion going on there of some sort. And I was able to disarticulate many of those, and many of you may have some, which I sold on. I still have some. So if anybody might be interested in some real cranial bones, then let me know. So where are we doing now? 20 minutes. Conditions. Let me have a look here. Any more things here? Where does the energy of life come from, if not from the craniosacral region? No idea. It's a feature of life. What is life? That's a big question. I think in my view, the primary respiratory mechanism is not life. It is, in my view, an expression of life. Where does that life come from? Another question. Another question here. Like to know how you ground yourself. Well, this is where training comes in, I'm afraid, because it's something you can't really learn from a book. It is being at peace. It's not dissimilar to something like what's the word I want? Yoga, and being at peace within yourself, so that you can be aware of what's going on. Calm all the unnecessary inputs. Be quiet within yourself, because both physically, emotionally, mentally, so that you can receive those quiet voices from that mechanism. Otherwise it's rather like trying to listen to a violin playing Bach's air in D in a hurricane. You can't do it. Make life easy for yourself. Calm all the rubbish out of the way and just be prepared to listen to what that mechanism is doing. But it is difficult. I don't think whether you can do it, but you need training, you need guidance. You do need guidance, you need training. I've been on, over the years, I've been on many courses. And with courses that I give with Caroline Penn, I learn all the time from students as well. So we all learn together. I listen. So what I do is to calm myself and listen to that mechanism, and then to allow that mechanism to tell me what it needs. It's as simple as that. And if that's what the mechanism wants to do, allow it to do it, like a psychotherapy, like a talking discipline. Allow it to be heard, to allow that mechanism to be heard. And if you are able to hear it, if it feels, that mechanism feels you are able to hear it, it will take something from you. It will take what it needs from you. It won't take it out of you. If you are grounded, you've got to be grounded at the center of the earth. You've got to be there. It's something else that Rollin said. Yeah. About energy. You use the body uses its own energy. Any change the body makes, it does it from itself, from its own energy. It doesn't have yours. Remember Rollin saying, you have your energy, you can't have mine. So just listen to the body, listen to your patient, allow it to make the changes it wants to make, but it does it from itself. You're not pushing anything into it. You're certainly not pushing anything into it, because you're allowing the body to make its own changes. You are not deciding what to do. And that's where training and guidance is important. Oh yeah, distant treatment. Yeah, where are we? there were several questions about distant remote treatment, distance treatment. Yes, I have been in courses, giving courses. We've been talking about mechanism. People are in practice session, palpating each other. Room is quiet. The room itself is centered and is quiet, and people are quietly listening to their model. Yes, I have been in courses like that where I can aware of a mechanism screaming at the far end of the room. Okay, fine. So what do? I go over there, find out what's happening, put my hands on the patient, guide that operator, say not this way, that way, and then so often the model says, "Ah, yes, thank you," and that mechanism calms down. I have to go over there. I've been aware. You can be aware of a mechanism when the room is centered. You can be aware of a mechanism screaming, if it's screaming. But I don't know any way of treating at a distance, and I'm afraid I wouldn't even try to. So for me, certainly remote treatment is not convinced. However, particularly during this time like the lockdown, yes, phoning patients, understanding their problem, and giving and talking to them, and guiding them, giving them exercises, or just listening to their problem, helping them to be able to manage it better. That may be very useful. Maybe will be very useful. But is that treating the mechanism? I think we have to, in my view, I think we have to be careful about how far we claim. But that's just me. Going through here, yeah. Yes. There are a lot of things about. We talked about other conditions, other treatments, other Reiki is mentioned, biodynamics is mentioned. They're different. One of the things that does trouble me a little bit about biomechanics, I must say, is that I've seen, and it seems to come up fairly regularly, this sheet that says how biodynamics changed from Sutherland's cranial osteopathy, and says how Sutherland's cranial osteopathy was very bony. That's unfair. That's unfair, because as I say, for Sutherland had to tone down what he knew to try it, because he was being so criticised by his colleagues. And therefore, he made it very bony, but he knew much more. He knew much more. And in fact, what is claimed by other therapeutics is what Sutherland was doing anyway. So no, Sutherland was not. Sutherland's primary respiratory mechanism is not bony, and Sutherland knew that in the first place. Can you say something about the depth of sensing, or our ability to go towards stillness? We are constantly being palpating, becoming aware to the limits of our ability, constantly, by definition, because as our ability improves, then we can go that bit further. So I'm constantly feeling, palpating, becoming aware of the limits of my ability. Am I on the central nervous system? Am I on this? Am I on that? On the other? I don't know. All I can say is, and I think it's important, it feels to me as if I am palpating the central nervous system. It feels to me that I am palpating the cerebrospinal fluid. It feels to me that I am aware, I am in touch with the energy mechanism of that whole individual. But I'm not saying that's where I am. It only represents what my palpatory sensorium tells me. And that's all one can go by, what it feels like to me. I've heard some people saying, I can feel this, I can feel that, I can feel the red nucleus and stuff. Yeah, okay. If you feel you can feel the red nucleus, yes. Okay, well, then say that's what it feels like to me. But that's what it feels like. You cannot say that I'm actually there unless you have research capabilities that I'm not aware of. I think we're getting close to limits here. Let me see what's here. So keep going. Keep to your limit. Keep to your limit. What else? What else? What else? Okay. Rollin Becker, a man of few words. Repeatedly, as my experience develops, and I think my palpatory ability develops, I am on a patient, I think, oh gosh, yes. And suddenly, Rollin Becker's words come into mind. Oh, I can understand now that I hear Rollin Becker talking about something, saying just that. Ah, I now understand what he means. And only when you palpate, when you experience it yourself, you really understand what that person was saying, what Rollin Becker was saying. And so you think, oh gosh, now I understand that, which is wonderful. And that's one of those wonderful things about osteopathy. That's what keeps you interested. That's what keeps you going all the time. And the exciting thing about osteopathy. Except, of course, 6 months later, you're a bit better again, and you say, actually, I didn't understand it then. Now I understand it anymore. So now I understand even more. And that goes on all the time. You crash through, pass through levels. You pass through developments all the time. And every time you think you understand it better, but then later on, you understand it even better. It's fascinating. It's osteopathy itself. Yeah, it will continue if people continue to practice it. It's been around for 150 years. It survived the NHS, free medicine, and it will continue provided people continue to practice true osteopathy. There are some people who choose to just treat minor orthopedic backache, neckache. Fine, they do a great job, as I said right at the beginning, because it is so common, and it does a great work. But that doesn't summarize osteopathy. It's those who, if you want to develop osteopathy, it's those who develop what they do. And I'm not criticizing people who just deal with minor orthopedic conditions. There always have been, and I hope there always will be, because it is so common. But as far as osteopathy is concerned, osteopathy is bigger than that. Osteopathy is bigger than that. It develops, as far as I'm concerned, forced me into re-evaluate what reality is. One day, in a course with Rollin Becker, we've been talking about the central nervous system, and we were talking about, I think it was the pineal, and it was toward the end of the morning, and he said, "Yeah, all right, well, let's talk about the pineal afterwards over lunch. Work out something about the pineal, and we'll talk about it again afterwards." And so, of course, we didn't have much lunch. We were spending all our time going through our anatomy books and our physiology books and all about the pineal and what it secretes and what it does. So we came back and said, well, what do you think? And so we gave him the whole rigmarole of what it is and where it is and what it does and when it secretes and when it this, that, and the other, and all the chemicals and this, that, and the other. He said, that's fascinating, he said, but how does it move? Let's see. Any more questions? Are you an observer, or do you focus your attention on one point during treatment? I now focus my attention on the energy of the body as a whole, not an anatomical point. You've got to know your anatomy, but this is what I'll talk about this is what I've talked about in Anatomy of Potency, is what I talk about in energy osteopathy. But you can focus your attention on one. If that's what the patient's body tells you it wants you to focus on, just focus on it. Don't try and do anything. Just watch it. Rather, listen to it. What is it you're trying to tell me? Don't decide to do anything. We don't, the osteopathy, we allow the body to make its own changes from within. We do not prescribe. We do not make a decision of what to do. So if the body tells you it's interested in one particular area, fine. Then listen to it like that. And the area where the problem, the expression of life is, where you feel is not necessarily related to symptoms. Yeah, no. Talk about Rollin. Yeah, he said, when a patient comes in, you take case history. All the history of the case and all your tests and this, that, and the other. You come to a diagnosis. Then put it all together in a box, tie a nice, neat ribbon around it, put it to one side, and now listen to the mechanism. How is the body expressing health? Is the body able to express health? What does the health of the body want from you? And what you'll tend to find is that the changes the body makes, you will be able to understand better then how that compromised health has led to a pattern of symptoms which has brought the patient in to come to see you. Rollin said that the symptoms are just the excuse of the body to bring the patient in to see you. Don't try and treat a condition. Don't try and treat symptoms. Listen to the mechanism, allow it to express itself, and then after that, you may well find, when you've thought about it afterwards, you may well understand how that compromised expression of health, it cannot express itself as it would like to, has led to that pattern of symptoms that's brought the patient in. And again, another thing from Rollin. Any change that the body makes of itself can only be towards health. Any change that the body makes of itself can only be towards health. That's what the body does, the self-renewing, regenerating, reforming system. If the body makes a change of itself, trust that that will be a change towards health. It cannot of itself be a change towards disease unless you put an energy into it of one form or another, whether it be infection or injury or stress or something. So what you're after is to detect a change which the body will, and any change that will be towards health. There's a question here about embryology. I've heard it said, and I remember Jim Jenner was talking about embryology. Yes, embryology is to me is fascinating. Yeah, it's fascinating. I remember Jim saying that the forces of embryology are the forces of health in the adult. Well, yeah, of course, because they're living systems. But you know, the forces of embryology are the forces for an embryo. The forces of health of a baby, of a small child, is the force of health of a small child. The forces of health of an adult are the force of health of an adult. It's the same force of health, but in different ages, and they're required different age. You don't need the force of they don't need the force of embryology for an adult. It's adapted. It's appropriate to the age of that individual, and so embryology certainly helps you to understand how the organism develops. But for my mind, I'm interested in that individual as they are at the time. People do get people can be confused, and sometimes get questions about, well, am I feeling this, am I feeling that, feeling the other, and sometimes and it can be people can get stuck on certain things. If it's not appropriate for you, don't worry about it. There are other ways of dealing of treatment, of looking at an individual. There's no one way. So don't get stuck on trying to develop a certain way to feel different levels. And you know, some people find it very, very useful. Other people don't. So if it doesn't find useful for you, well then don't have to follow a path that doesn't work for you. Ah, oh dear. Okay. This is probably might be a way of finishing off here. Is death part of health? If the body, you know, who's to know? This is a philosophical thing, isn't it? I'm not saying this is right or this is wrong. It's one way of looking at it. If the body is, if a living organism, a self-renewing, self-regenerating, self-reforming organism, as it reforms, you know, cells die and then move on. Arguably, it may well be that we are part of that same self-renewing, regenerating, reforming system. That we come as a big organism, as a total organism, we grow, we develop, we mature, we function, and then part of that renewal of that species, we are replaced. Is that what death is? I don't know. Is it, or is it, are we moving on to some other higher level? I don't know. It's an interesting thought, isn't it? Yeah, the comment here is it is view. It's just that part of the flow of life, and I think that's perfectly reasonable. I don't know. That could be a part of the flow of life, part of that self-renewing, regenerating, reforming system as a totality of individuals. Let's see if I've got any more questions that I meant to answer here. Yes. Yeah, I talk in the about the void in Anatomy of Potency. What I would recommend is that you try not to associate ideas with preconceived ideas. Try and avoid putting some of the things I'm talking about into boxes, because when you associate it with preconceived ideas, you carry all the baggage of your previous conceived ideas, and you don't really, therefore, think about the point I'm trying to get over. So, the particular example for the void, take it from where I'm talking. Take that from where I'm talking about. Don't try and associate it with anything else. Don't try and associate it with any other baggage, because you'll take the baggage with it. So it's not the same as other things, not what I'm talking about anyway. Take it as a concept, as stated, without associating it with other things. Right, I don't know, I think we're pretty well up timing on this now. I think there's nothing else I can talk about. Anything else? Where we are. Well, I hope you're still there. I can't see anybody. Oh, I can see Tracy. I hope that's been helpful. If someone wants to come back to me on anything, well then by all means do. I was going to say, as someone used to say, if you have been, thanks for listening.
That's just fantastic. Thank you so much, Nicholas. Heartfelt appreciations and loads of thanks coming in through the chat and the Q&A. Just wonderful to hear you talk just so open-heartedly, and just huge appreciation to you. Thank you so much. I would like to just name that Nicholas will be doing a seminar with us at CTT, and I'm about to put a screenshot up so that you can all have a little look at that for more information of where you can go about that. So there we go. So it's with Nicholas and Caroline Penn, 23rd to 24th of January. Look forward to seeing lots of you there. Just go to our website for further information. We hope that you find these webinars useful. We very much enjoy putting them on for everybody, so we do look forward to seeing you all hopefully next week. Once again, Nicholas, thank you so much for your time and energy. We've absolutely loved hosting this for you this evening. So thanks everybody, and take care, and hopefully we'll see you all again soon.